The Eternal Wisdom's landing created a temporary media sensation, but within days, the human news cycle had already begun to shift to other stories. This baffled Nix Vala's cultural analysis team, who had expected their arrival to dominate human discourse for decades. Their attention span is disturbing, reported cultural specialist Miri, a four-armed Synthian whose specialized cerebral lobes could typically predict behavioral patterns with 98% accuracy. They process paradigm-shifting events, then simply incorporate them and move on. No species we've encountered adapts to conceptual shifts this quickly. Meanwhile, in a hastily established diplomatic compound outside Geneva, Alina guided Ambassador Zoltan and his entourage through their first direct meetings with Earth's various governmental representatives. The Galactic Council's universal translator struggled with human linguistic nuances, especially idioms, sarcasm, and regional dialects. "Your species communicates inefficiently," Zoltan observed after a particularly confusing exchange with the Brazilian delegate. "Your words often mean something different from their literal interpretation." Elena laughed. "Language isn't just for transmitting information. It's for building relationships. The ambiguity is a feature, not a bug." The concept seemed to physically pain the ambassador, whose species communicated through precise harmonic vibrations with strictly defined meanings. Within the council vessel, Science Officer Xantal made another troubling discovery. Her analysis of human digital networks revealed unprecedented information density and accessibility, with virtually all human knowledge available to any individual with basic technology. Most species restrict information based on status, role, or clearance, she explained during the evening briefing. Humans distribute knowledge indiscriminately. Their youngest members have access to their most advanced physics. Their entertainment contains speculative concepts that accidentally approximate actual galactic technologies, and they freely debate their own societal flaws on public forums. A security nightmare, assessed Security Chief Krex, a mantis-like Thracian. No species can maintain stability with such information chaos. Yet humans had. Somehow. On the fifth day, the Council's careful assessment schedule was disrupted when Alina arrived with an unexpected proposal. "Your evaluation process is designed for pre-spaceflight civilizations," she explained, sliding a data crystal across the table. "We've taken the liberty of completing the preliminary assessments ourselves, using your own metrics. We've also identified 17 logical inconsistencies in your evaluation framework." Zoltan's facial appendages twitched with shock. "These protocols have been refined over 40,000 years. By species who think like you." Alina interrupted gently. "We don't. That's our value proposition." Later that evening, in his private quarters, Zoltan reviewed Earth's media broadcasts, searching for insight. A children's educational program caught his attention. Young humans learning complex problem-solving through competitive games. The instructor deliberately limited their tools, forcing improvisation. When one child complained about the difficulty, the teacher responded with a phrase that Zoltan had to replay 3 times to comprehend. "The solution exists. You just haven't found it yet." This mindset permeated human culture, the assumption that barriers existed to be overcome, that limitations were temporary, that impossible merely meant not yet accomplished. Such thinking was simultaneously primitive and revolutionary. Zoltan composed an encrypted message to the Council High Chamber. "Preliminary assessment suggests anomalous development pattern. Request full evaluation conclave. Species presents unique paradox. Technologically underdeveloped yet conceptually advanced beyond anticipated parameters. Recommended classification. Potential divergent." The response was immediate and unprecedented. Request granted. Conclave en route. Maintain containment protocols. High Counselor Vex will personally oversee evaluation. Zoltan stared at the message in shock. No preliminary assessment had ever warranted a High Counselor's direct involvement. What had they discovered? High Counselor Vex's arrival transformed the assessment from a routine procedure into a spectacle. His personal vessel, The dominant will darkened skies over Lake Geneva as it descended, 3 times larger than the eternal wisdom, and bristling with sensor arrays and what humans correctly identified as weapon systems. Subtle, Elena remarked dryly to Zoltan at the reception ceremony. Vex stood 2 meters tall, exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial inscriptions detailing his battle honors. Unlike the other council representatives who attempted to appear approachable, Vex embraced intimidation as diplomacy. "I will observe directly," he announced, bypassing traditional protocols. No filtration, no intermediaries. What followed was a series of increasingly demanding demonstrations across multiple disciplines. In quantum computing, Vex presented a factorization problem that should have required days of calculation. Miguel's team solved it in hours using a hybrid algorithm developed by a graduate student in Mumbai. Functional but inelegant was Vex's dismissive assessment. The testing continued with material science, where the council presented a thermal insulation challenge. Human engineers demonstrated a recently developed aerogel that outperformed council standards by utilizing microscopic air pockets in a seemingly counterintuitive structure. Acceptable performance through crude methodology. Vex noted, though Xantal's instruments detected elevated stress markers in his biochemistry. The pattern repeated across disciplines, humans achieving comparable or occasionally superior results through methods the council considered primitive, inefficient, or theoretically flawed. Each success visibly unsettled Vex, whose mandibles clicked with increasing frequency. The breaking point came during the medicine and biotechnology assessment. Human doctors presented case studies of experimental treatments, engineered phages targeting antibiotic-resistant bacteria, SUR-ISPR techniques personalized for individual patients, and neural interfaces allowing paralyzed patients to control prosthetics through thought. Enough demonstrations, Vex interrupted, turning to Elena. "Your medical technology remains centuries behind council standards, yet you approach certain problems with methodologies our specialists never considered. Explain this development discrepancy." Elena glanced at Miguel, who nodded slightly. They had anticipated this question. "Necessity," she replied simply. "Your species evolved through gradual optimization. Most council races had millennia of stability to perfect their technologies incrementally." Miguel continued, his scarred hands gesturing as he spoke. "Humans faced constant existential pressures, disease, climate shifts, predators, and mostly each other. We didn't have the luxury of perfect solutions. We needed working solutions immediately." Elena added, "You built your technologies like a planned city, logical, orderly, optimize. Ours evolved like an ancient metropolis, layers built upon layers, preserving useful accidents, abandoning failed approaches, constantly adapting to immediate needs." Vex's compound eyes studied them with unnerving intensity. "This explains your technological inconsistency, but not your species' unusual cognitive approach. No other sentient race demonstrates your particular problem-solving methodology." "Perhaps," suggested Xantal hesitantly, "it's because humans are the only species we've encountered whose intelligence evolved primarily as a survival adaptation rather than a social one." The chamber fell silent as the implications resonated. Council species had generally developed intelligence to manage complex social structures. Humans had developed intelligence primarily to overcome environmental challenges. "I require access to human historical records," Vex announced suddenly. Complete and unfiltered. Elena exchanged concerned glances with her team. "Counselor, our history contains much that we're not proud of." "Precisely," Vex interrupted. "I need to understand what forged your species. The assessment parameters have changed." In that moment, everyone realized this was no longer a standard evaluation. Something about humanity had disrupted the Council's established understanding of sentient development. The question was no longer whether humans met Council standards, but whether those standards were adequate to measure humanity at all. For 72 hours, Vex remained isolated in a secure chamber, absorbing Earth's historical records. Surveillance indicators showed he neither slept nor consumed sustenance during this period, behavior extreme even for his species. When he finally emerged, his exoskeleton had darkened noticeably, a physiological response indicating deep cognitive distress. "Your world wars," he addressed Elena without preamble in a private meeting. "You had barely mastered flight before using it to rain death from above. You split the atom and immediately built weapons. You connected your world with digital networks, then used them for surveillance and deception." Elena nodded grimly. "We've never hidden our capacity for self-destruction. Yet after each catastrophe, you advanced more rapidly." Vex continued, mandibles working in agitation. "The most significant technological leaps in human history directly followed your most devastating conflicts. This pattern is unprecedented. War is a terrible accelerant," Elena acknowledged. "But it's only part of the story." She led Vex to a different kind of demonstration, not of technology, but of human cultural expression. Art galleries showcasing everything from Renaissance masterpieces to contemporary digital immersives. Concert halls where orchestras performed ancient compositions alongside experimental sound artists. Culinary exhibitions where traditions spanning continents merged into new forms. "Your species creates without practical purpose," Vex observed, watching a ballet performance with evident confusion. "These movements serve no function. Beauty is its own function," Elena replied. "We create because it fulfills us." This concept seemed to disturb Vex more than human warfare had. The notion that expression could exist without utility challenged fundamental council principles of efficiency and purpose. Meanwhile, Santal's unauthorized research had progressed from observation to experimentation. In her private laboratory aboard the Eternal Wisdom, she had begun testing human adaptive capabilities at the cellular level. Human tissue samples demonstrated remarkable resilience to radiation, toxins, and extreme conditions, often through mechanisms absent in council species. "Their cells fight," she recorded in her research log. "When damaged, human cells don't merely repair, they adapt. Each generation of cells incorporates defensive responses against previous threats. They possess biological memory at a subcellular level." Her most disturbing discovery came when examining human neural tissue. Unlike the specialized, optimized neural structures of council species, human brains showed chaotic, seemingly inefficient organization, yet demonstrated superior plasticity and recovery from damage. "They should not function as effectively as they do," she noted. "Their neural architecture violates established principles of efficient cognition, yet achieves comparable results through massively redundant, high-energy consumption systems. Human brains are simultaneously primitive and innovative, like all their technologies." As Santal completed her log entry, her laboratory door opened unexpectedly. She moved to hide her unauthorized research, but relaxed when she saw Miguel enter rather than a council official. "Your security systems are impressive," he commented casually, "but your encryption has conceptual flaws." "You've been monitoring my research." Santal's chromatophores flashed with indignation. Miguel shrugged. "You're studying us. We're studying you. Seems fair. And you're not concerned by what I've discovered." "Actually," Miguel replied, producing a data crystal, "I thought you might want our research on your species. We've been examining council biology since first contact. You've missed some interesting connections between your neural composition and information processing limitations." He placed the crystal beside her equipment. "Humans don't just adapt through conflict. We also advance through cooperation, even with those studying us without permission." As Miguel departed, Santal stared at the crystal, faced with a disturbing reality. While the Council had been evaluating humanity, humans had been evaluating the Council, and potentially understanding it better than it understood itself. In the aftermath of the Singularity containment, the Council ship's med bay overflowed with injured personnel. Among them lay Miguel, his right arm covered in radiation burns from reaching into the plasma stream to adjust a critical mechanism. Elena sat beside him, reviewing data from the incident on a tablet. "You shouldn't have taken that risk," she said quietly. Miguel's laugh turned into a painful cough. Says the woman who manually recalibrated a quantum field generator. Through the transparent partition, they watched alien physicians moving efficiently between patients, applying technology centuries beyond Earth medicine. Yet human injuries were healing at comparable rates to the Council species, despite receiving only basic treatment compatible with human physiology. "They're documenting everything," Miguel whispered. "Our recovery rates, cellular responses, pain thresholds." This disaster became their biggest data collection opportunity. Elena nodded slightly. "And we're collecting data too." The door slid open as Ambassador Zoltan entered, moving with the careful precision of someone still processing shock. "The High Council demands a full explanation of your methodology." The translator struggled to convey his tone. "Particularly how you identified the solution when our engineers could not." "We didn't overthink it," Miguel answered simply. "Your engineers saw a destabilizing quantum singularity requiring specialized knowledge. We saw a heat exchange problem with exotic variables." Elena added, "You approached it from established theory downward. We worked from observable effects upward." Zoltan's appendages flickered in what humans had learned indicated deep disturbance. But the solution contradicted 7 established laws of quantum mechanics. "No," Elena corrected gently. "It contradicted your understanding of those laws." Before Zoltan could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The vessel shuddered as gravitational systems fluctuated. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the medbay in pulsing amber. "Secondary containment failure," announced the ship's eye. 30 minutes to catastrophic system collapse. Zoltan froze momentarily, a reaction Elena recognized from previous crises. The Council species excelled at executing established protocols, but struggled with cascading failures that required improvisational responses. Miguel was already disconnecting himself from monitoring equipment. "The temporary patch is failing," he said, wincing as he stood. "We need to implement a permanent solution." "You require medical attention," Zoltan protested. "Everyone requires continued existence," Miguel countered. "That takes priority." As they hurried toward the engine room, they passed Council engineers frantically reviewing technical manuals and simulations, still seeking answers within established frameworks while precious minutes ticked away. The corridors grew warmer as they approached the core, radiation warnings flashing on Elena's hastily calibrated detector. Inside the engine room, chaos reigned. Holographic displays showed the containment field fluctuating wildly as Council technicians attempted increasingly desperate measures. "Stop!" Elena's voice cut through the noise. "Your approaches are making it worse. The field needs to breathe." "Containment fields cannot breathe," objected the chief engineer, a spindly Moravian with multiple specialized limbs. "They must maintain absolute stability." "That's your problem," Miguel replied, already reconfiguring a control panel. "You're fighting the quantum fluctuations instead of working with them." To the horror of the Council engineers, Miguel began deliberately introducing controlled oscillations into the containment field, allowing it to pulse rhythmically rather than maintaining rigid parameters. "The harmonic principle," Elena explained, supporting Miguel's weight as he worked. "The singularity has its own resonance frequency. Match it, and you can guide it rather than constrain it." The readings gradually stabilized, the violent fluctuations resolving into predictable patterns. Council engineers watched in stunned silence as the terminal warning countdown paused, then retracted. "Impossible," whispered the chief engineer. "You introduced instability to create stability." Miguel slumped against a console, his injured arm hanging limply. "Sometimes," he murmured through pain-clenched teeth, "you have to break something to fix it properly." The grand chamber of harmonium fell silent as security footage of human tourists played across the massive holographic display. Each image showed humans in locations they should never have accessed. A researcher sketching extinct fauna in a biological preserve on Arcturus IV, A family picnicking beside the sacred pools of Moravian Prime. 2 college students sharing drinks with Lumerian miners at an outpost bar. This infiltration constitutes an act of aggression, declared Councillor Demmer of the Preservationist faction, membranous wings fluttering in agitation. They violated sovereign territories across 16 systems. Elena stood calmly in the center of the chamber, unfazed by the accusations. Not infiltration. Cultural exchange. Every human you see obtained permission from local inhabitants. She gestured toward the display. Just not from you. This distinction created visible discomfort among the council representatives. The concept that planetary inhabitants might bypass council authority to interact directly with humans represented a paradigm shift in interstellar relations. For millennia, the council had served as the interface between civilizations, managing all contact through carefully established protocols. You've encouraged insurrection, Vex stated, unexpectedly calm despite the severity of the charge. We've established relationships, Elena corrected. Something your assessment process never considered. While you evaluated our technology, resources, and military potential, you neglected to assess how we connect with others. She activated her own display, showing footage of human diplomats, aid workers, artists, and teachers engaged with representatives from dozens of species across council space. No advanced technology, no show of force, just people talking, sharing meals, exchanging ideas, teaching each other songs and games. The Draxi don't sing, muttered a council observer, watching footage of a Draxian soldier attempting to follow a human melody. They do now, Elena replied. Zoltan, who had remained silent during the proceedings, finally spoke. I've reviewed the initial contact logs from every system where humans have appeared. In each case, local populations initiated contact, not humans. They saw out the visitors. This revelation caused a ripple of unease through the chamber. Councillor Paxomnia, oldest among them, leaned forward on ancient supports. Why would established civilizations risk council's censure to speak with an unclassified species? Because we listen, came a new voice. All eyes turned as Miguel entered through a side entrance, arms still bandaged from the Singularity incident. He shouldn't have been there, hadn't been invited to these high-level proceedings, yet somehow he had gained access to the most secure chamber in council space. For centuries, many of your protectorate worlds have sent representatives to the council with proposals, innovations, and concerns, Miguel continued, walking slowly but purposefully toward Elena. Your records show you acknowledged only 12% of these communications, implemented 3% of their suggestions, and visited these worlds personally only during scheduled assessment periods. Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly. You accessed sealed council archives. No, Miguel replied. Your protectorates share them with us. They've maintained their own records of being ignored. He reached Elena's side, standing shoulder to shoulder with her. Humanity's greatest technology isn't our engines or weapons or science. It's our ability to form connections across differences. We evolved as social creatures on a planet with thousands of cultures, languages, and belief systems. Adaptation wasn't just physical for us, it was social. Elena added quietly, You've spent millennia perfecting a single way of being. We've spent our existence exploring countless ways to exist together, sometimes succeeding, often failing, but always learning. Around the chamber's perimeter, previously hidden doors slid open. Representatives from 27 protectorate worlds entered, beings who, by council protocol, had no right to attend such proceedings. Their presence transformed the nature of the assembly from a judgment to a reckoning. This is unprecedented, Zoltan whispered, equal parts horrified and fascinated. That's rather our specialty, Elena replied. The sevenfold challenge arena resembled a massive geodesic dome, each triangular panel shifting between opacity and transparency as the trials progressed. Observation galleries surrounded the central testing space, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, the largest gathering in council history. The unprecedented audience underscored the event's importance. This was no longer merely about humanity's assessment, but about the Council's future direction. Ancient Counselor Pax Omnia personally oversaw the fourth trial. Adaptability. The human team entered a chamber whose environmental conditions shifted unpredictably. Gravity fluctuations, atmospheric composition changes, temperature swings, and electromagnetic pulses that disrupted technology. Previous species averaged 46 minutes survival, noted a Lumerian observer as the trial began. The record is 62 minutes by the Traxt Collective. Inside the chamber, the teenage optimist, Sophia Jung, a high school student from Vancouver, took unexpected command. While the others instinctively analyzed the environmental shifts, Sophia instead focused on the patterns between changes. She quickly realized the fluctuations weren't random but followed a complex algorithm. "It's music," she announced, stopping the team's frantic adaptations. "Listen to the rhythm of the changes." The physicist looked skeptical but paused to observe. The fighter, already adapting her movements to the gravity shifts, began to time her motions to the subtle pattern. The kindergarten teacher, Hannah Okafor from Lagos, started humming, matching the fluctuation tempo. "Counterpoint," Hannah suggested. "If the environment follows a musical structure, we should respond with complementary patterns rather than matching it directly." What followed astonished the observers. Rather than merely reacting to each environmental change, the humans began anticipating them, moving in harmony with the fluctuations. They transformed the challenge from survival to choreography, conserving energy by working with the shifts rather than against them. "They're dancing with chaos," whispered Santal, who had requested special permission to observe the trials. 3 hours later, with no sign of human withdrawal, Pax Omnia officially concluded the trial, the first time in challenge history that participants had exceeded assessment parameters. "Explain your methodology," Pax Omnia requested afterward, ancient voice crackling with genuine curiosity. Sophia shrugged. "The universe isn't random. Even chaos has patterns if you're willing to find them." "But how did you recognize musical structures in environmental fluctuations?" pressed a council scientist. "I play cello," Sophia replied simply. "Hannah teaches music to 5-year-olds. We hear patterns others miss." The fifth challenge, cooperation, began with a twist. Council assessors separated the human team, placing each member with representatives from different species with whom they shared no common language, biology, or sensory perception. Each mixed group faced a complex problem requiring unified action to solve. The Council expected this to be humanity's downfall. Without their team cohesion, and with communication barriers, humans should struggle to form effective partnerships with alien counterparts. Instead, within minutes, the kindergarten teacher had established a simplified sign language with her group. The philosopher created a shared visual notation system for abstract concepts. The fighter used rhythmic movements to coordinate timing. Miguel, still recovering from his injuries, found common ground with his team through mathematical equations sketched in the sand. Most striking was Alina's approach. Paired with entities that communicated through pheromones and electromagnetic pulses, methods completely inaccessible to human physiology, she distributed simple mechanical devices she had brought hidden in her clothing. These crude tools could translate electromagnetic signals into light patterns and chemical signatures into color changes, creating bridges between incompatible communication systems. She prepared for this specific scenario. Zoltan realized, mandibles clicking in amazement. They anticipated every challenge. Vex, watching silently, finally understood the true nature of human advancement. They don't merely adapt to environments, he noted in his private log. They adapt environments to themselves. The final day of the sevenfold challenge brought unprecedented tension to Harmonium. The self-sustaining energy system, officially designated the entropy equilibrium engine in council records, represented more than a mere technical problem. It was, according to ancient texts, the theoretical foundation for the next evolutionary leap in galactic civilization. Previous attempts resulted in 3 planetary-scale disasters. Counselor Pax Omnia informed the observers solemnly. Further research was prohibited after the Cygnus collapse of the 87th millennium. In the restricted archives open only to the highest council echelons, the system carried another name: God's Circuit, a theoretical energy architecture that could rewrite the fundamental constraints of cosmic existence. As expected, the council team approached the challenge methodically, building on thousands of years of incremental research. Their laboratory resembled a temple of science, pristine, organized, with specialists assigned to specific components, working in perfect coordination. In stark contrast, the human workspace had devolved into what appeared to be structured chaos. Workstations had been reconfigured into a circular arrangement that council observers found inefficient. Walls were covered with equations, diagrams, and references to seemingly unrelated concepts from earth sciences, mycorrhizal networks, embryonic development, weather patterns, even economic systems. They're creating pointless correlations, noted a Moravian scientist dismissively. Xantal disagreed. They're looking for commonalities across systems that appear unrelated. It's a distinctly human approach, recognizing patterns across disparate domains. The teenage optimist, Sophia, spent much of her time not working on components, but sketching abstract patterns and shapes, occasionally asking her teammates questions that seemed irrelevant to the challenge. The philosopher, Dr. Amara Okafor, frequently pulled the team away from their work for what she called perspective shifts, thought experiments that forced them to reconsider fundamental assumptions. On the third day, something unexpected occurred. Miguel asked for the test chamber to be darkened completely. In the pitch black, he activated their prototype. It emitted a soft blue glow that pulsed rhythmically, seemingly unsuccessful as an energy system. Failed demonstration, logged the council observers. But Sophia grinned, pointing to the pulsing light. It's breathing. The team had created not a mechanical energy system, but something almost organically responsive to its environment. When additional energy was introduced, the system expanded its operations. When energy decreased, it contracted, all while maintaining a positive energy coefficient. Impossible, whispered a senior council physicist, checking readings that showed the system producing 28% more energy than input. This violates conservation principles. Dr. Okafor smiled. Only if you assume energy must remain within a single probabilistic state. The team explained their approach. Rather than fighting entropy, they had created a system that pulled potential energy from parallel quantum states where different outcomes had occurred. The system wasn't generating energy, but borrowing it from versions of itself that had failed in alternate realities. You've weaponized the multiverse, Vex stated, mandibles rigid with shock. We've partnered with it, corrected Alina. The system maintains equilibrium across probability space. For every reality where it produces excess energy, there's one where it consumes excess. The net universal energy remains constant. The council team abandoned their demonstration, recognizing their approach had been fundamentally limited by assumptions they had never thought to question. For millennia, they had attempted to bend universal laws through ever more sophisticated technology. Humans had simply stepped sideways and found the spaces between those laws. As the challenge concluded, Counselor Pax Omnia approached the human team privately. In my 40,000 years, the ancient being communicated, neural patterns flickering with emotion. I have never witnessed such a profound conceptual shift. You haven't merely solved the problem, you've redefined our understanding of what problems and solutions can be. Elena looked at the wizened counselor, sensing genuine wonder beneath the formal exterior. That's humanity's true power, she said gently. Not what we build, but how we see. The formal declaration ceremony took place beneath the open dome of Harmonium's Grand Nexus, where the artificial sky had been programmed to display constellations from Earth, a subtle acknowledgement of humanity's new status. Representatives from 500 worlds attended, including many from previously overlooked protectorate planets. The divergent partner species designation shimmered in holographic script above the assembly, the text periodically shifting between Council Standard and various human languages. Behind this official terminology lay 3 days of intense negotiation during which Elena and her team had rejected both traditional membership and special protectorate status. "What happens now?" asked a junior Lumerian diplomat during the reception that followed, when other species request similar arrangements. "Then we adapt," replied Zoltan, who had been appointed head of the newly formed Integration Council, a body created specifically to manage the unprecedented relationship with humanity and any future divergent partners. Across the reception hall, Vex engaged in animated conversation with Miguel and Dr. Okafor, his formal military bearing softened by genuine intellectual curiosity. The topic: human conflict resolution mechanisms. What had begun as Vex's strategic assessment of human warfare had evolved into something more profound. Recognition that human societies had developed unique approaches to managing their own destructive tendencies. "Your species turns even self-destruction into a learning process," Vex noted, mandibles relaxed in what humans now recognized as an expression of wonder. No other sentient race survives its own technological adolescence without external guidance. In a quieter corner, Sophia shared mathematical puzzles with several young Arcturians, their crystal-faceted sensory organs gleaming with delight at each new challenge. The seemingly frivolous exchange represented something revolutionary in council space, cross-species education occurring naturally, without formal protocols or institutional frameworks. Elena found herself momentarily alone, watching these interactions from the periphery until Xantal approached, her exoskeleton newly modified to allow greater gestural expression, an adaptation clearly inspired by human nonverbal communication. "The Council Science Directorate has approved my proposal," Xantal announced without preamble. "The collaborative research initiative begins next month." Elena smiled. "Sending Council scientists to Earth and human researchers to 19 Council worlds," Xantal confirmed. "Not as visitors or observers, but as active participants in each other's scientific processes." This program had been Elena's priority during negotiations, more important than technology exchanges or resource agreements. Understanding how different species approached problem-solving would yield far greater long-term benefits than any immediate technological gains. As the reception concluded, a small incident occurred that would later be recorded in Council archives as the inflection point. A human child, the daughter of one of the diplomatic staff, wandered away from her parents and approached the ancient counselor Pax Omnia, whose life support apparatus typically intimidated even seasoned diplomats. "Are you really 40,000 years old?" the child asked directly, bypassing protocols that would have prevented such a personal query. Rather than signaling for handlers to remove the child, Pax Omnia adjusted his translator for simpler language. "Yes, little one. I have witnessed the rise and fall of many civilizations." "That sounds lonely," the child observed with unexpected insight. "Would you like to see my drawing? It's a picture of my family." Without waiting for permission, she held up a colorful rendering of stick figures standing together. The great hall fell silent as Pax Omnia extended a withered appendage to accept the drawing, a gesture requiring significant effort from his ancient form. He studied it with sensory organs that had witnessed stellar births and planetary extinctions, then responded in a voice that carried clearly through the hushed space. "In 40,000 years, no one has ever simply offered me a gift without purpose or protocol. This is refreshing." The moment crystallized everything the challenge had demonstrated. Humanity's unique gift wasn't their technology or even their adaptability, but their ability to create genuine connection across vast differences, to see persons where others saw only positions, to find familiarity in the foreign. As the Earth delegation prepared to depart, Vex approached Elena one final time. "We're still not certain whether your species represents our greatest hope or our greatest threat," he admitted. Elena smiled. "The truly remarkable thing about humans is that we're almost certainly both."